In any kind of video editing, one of the biggest changes to the look of your video is color correction. You can completely change the style and theme of the footage with this effect. In this tutorial, we'll go through the basics of color correcting your footage. So we have this video of some hikers, and I want to adjust the colors within it. To do this, I'm going to search Lumetri in my effects panel. You can pretty easily find a bunch of presets to use for color correction, and these can be great, but I'll show you how to manually do color correction. Instead of a preset, find the Lumetri Color effect and drag it onto your footage. Next, open your effects control panel. You may want to play with your window size to make things easier to see. Now, in the Lumetri Color effect, you will have lots of drop-down menus. Let's start with basic correction. From here, we can control lots of elements that target the footage as a whole. When changing these values, change them only a little bit up or down, unless you want your piece to be very different color-wise. With temperature, we can increase the cold or soft light. With tint, we can increase or decrease the orange and magenta. With saturation, we can increase the saturation of the colors. Exposure digitally brightens or darkens your image. Only increase or decrease this by a few decimal points. Contrast is a value that increases the brightness of the highlights and decreases the brightness of the shadows. Highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks are all finer controls of the overall contrast of the image. Oftentimes, basic correction is all you need to get your footage looking the way you want. Color correction can be a lot more complicated than that as well. We'll skip over the creative drop-down menu for now. I find it to be less useful than the next ones. Curves is where color correction can get a bit complicated. The first graph here shows your RGB values combined into one. We can make points on this graph to really increase or decrease the brightness of the colors as a whole. You can make several points on this graph, and as you can see, you can really drastically change things pretty easily. Like most things in color correction, you'll usually only change the values a little. You can target a specific color value by switching the color of the tab. For example, we could use this to brighten up all the greens, but there are more fine controls below. Now we get into more complex graphs. Hue versus saturation. So the X on the graph is the hue, and the Y is the saturation. Like before, you can click on the graph to make points. If you only move things with one point, it will control the whole image and basically be the same as increasing the saturation in basic correction. You can basically use these graphs to target specific colors and apply basic correction to those colors specifically. On this hue versus hue graph, I'm going to take the jacket on the girl on the left and try and turn it purple. So I'll make some points on the graph to bring the blue values closer to purple, and I can do a pretty good job with this. The hue versus luma chart lets you control the brightness of specific hues. Sometimes this can be a little hard to notice. Luma versus saturation controls the brightness of more or less saturated colors. You can see for me this mostly controls the road. And saturation versus saturation lets you control the saturation of colors depending on how saturated they are. Moving on, you have the color wheels drop-down menu. The best way to think of this menu is that it tints your original image, and you can control how much it tints it by, and what range of light does it tint. Unless you're changing your image to be lit by a colored light, I would normally avoid using this extensively. Finally, we have HSL secondary, which basically lets you target a specific color and then control it. When you see this gray screen, it's showing my selection of colors that this panel controls. This drop-down menu can be very useful for fine-tuning specific colors, but can also be the most complicated. Finally, you have your vignette menu, which in comparison is pretty self-explanatory. You can change the brightness of the vignette, where it starts and where it stops, how much you feather it, and how round it is. I find most footage benefits from a subtle dark vignette around the edges. And with that, we've made it to the bottom of the effect. I'll go back and turn it on and off so we can see the difference. You can see just how much effort color correcting can take, but you can also see how huge of an impact it can have on your footage. Also, keep in mind that color correcting can slow down your editing software, so it's best to wait until you're done editing before you color correct your footage. If this tutorial helps you, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. It really helps me out. Thanks for watching.